Don't want you to get sunburnt. G'day, Stu from UAV Futures here, and today, well, I am pumped and very excited because I've actually already filmed the set to come back and refilm it because I had so much fun. But what this is the part one, the bench breakdown, where we look at the text and the specs of the X140. Now, this is from Helifar, and it is a budget little racer, but let me tell you, the performance of this thing is anything but. Now, read it with me. This is the X140, and if you could just read this word right here, some of you might have read X140 Pro, but there's a bit of a spelling mistake there, so it's called the X140 RPA, but luckily the spelling quality doesn't reflect the quality of the drone. Now, in the past, we have reviewed some Helifar stuff, and I think it was the last video uploaded. I really didn't like their Futon V2. I thought that was junk, but let me tell you, I've been putting a lot of packs through this one, and I'm so excited because it's about to do some stuff you ain't never seen. You've never seen speeds like this in such a little tiny little 3-inch drone. I mean, check this out.
No way, no way!
You can see the speeds there. They've got Cal very excited. You're going to have to wait for the part 2, which should be uploaded in a couple of hours since this part 1. But anyway, let's kick it off with the part 1. Put it on the bench, look at the text and the specs, and find out, like, for the price, 150, 160, you're getting an awful lot of drone with some cool design. And then in the part 2, that's where we have some real fun. So, let's stick it on the bench, get started with this little, tiny little 3-inch, which really is a contender to the XJB, which I've liked for the longest time. Kick it off and find out what makes this little 3-inch drone so special. So let's do it in 3, 2, 1. Alrighty, here it is on the bench, ready for the text and the specs, and straight off the bat, there's a few things I want to talk about it. You do get some props. These are not the ones that come with it, because little disclaimer, I've already had this thing out, flying it around. I've turned it into a rocket ship, and I did change the props out. So you are going to get some of these lesser quality props when you get yours. But here it is on the bench. It's a little 3-inch racer. It's designed to be taken out of the box, ripped around. You are going to need to do a little bit of PID tuning on it, which I do think is a shame. Flash some PIDs in the part 2 where you can put them on. But it's definitely got some very, very cool kit in here. Now, what we should do, let's stick it on the scales, find out how much it's going to weigh. So these have teared off. It's coming in at, and I'll just tuck this little XT60 on the end. It's coming in at, hopefully you guys can see that, 160 grams. So a very, very light, tiny little 3-inch racer, but it does have some chunky motors in here as well, and I really like the components. We're about to go through that. So that's what we should do, and then we'll break it down, look at the design of the thing, the quality, the pros and cons, and then wrap it up with some final thoughts. Now, I guess the first component I want to talk about is the frame itself. So you can see it's made up of 4 individual arms. You will need to tighten these bolts up a little bit just to make sure everything's nice and secure. I recommend you do that to all quads you get anyway. If we zero this off, let's find out the arms are coming in. See if I can get a nice part to do this. The arms are 4mm thick, so hopefully you guys can see that there. And the 4 individual arms, and I think that's fine. It's a very, very rigid little frame. It's kind of like the floss in the way that it sort of goes together, but I don't think that's a bad thing when it comes to these tiny little ones. In 5 inches, yeah, sometimes I have my doubts, and I'm sure some people will disagree with me, but I really like this little frame design in this 3-inch. It does perform very, very nicely. It's got a little bit of motor protection on the outside. Now, speaking of the props, you do get 2 sets of these. These look like the sort of Racer Star 4-blade props, and I'm just going to say they're junk. When you get these, just throw them away or use them once, and as soon as they bend, throw them out. Don't get any more of these. You're much better off to put some Cyclones or some Racers Gem Fans. I'll link them down below anyway. You're much better to put some of those other props on here, because that's where you get the most out of these, especially coupled with the motors that are inside this thing. Now, what these are, they're branded as Sky Stars, and I love these motors. Let me tell you, I've never seen power like this before. They're 1408s, 3,800 kV, so they spin very, very quick, but also a 1408, that's a very high stator, which means you can pump a ton of juice into these things. They can really spin some torquey props, and you're going to see that in the part. So I know I keep talking about it, but it really, it's blown my mind in how much performance I got out of this thing. Now, if we move towards the middle, of course, it's got a little 4-in-1, and you see I did put my own little receiver in here and zip tied it down because I've been flying around. But what we've got on the ESC side of things, we've got our D-Shot 1200 BioHeli 32-bit, which is great, and that's a 25 amp ESC, which is about the perfect combination, I think, for some really nice motors like this. On top of that, we've got our F4 flight controller, Rockin' Betaflight OSD, so pretty standard stuff there, but it works very, very well. And then we've also got our little VTX little on the top there, quite a lot of room in this one, and this also also it's got smart audio, which is great, pit mode, it's got different power levels, and all your sort of standard channels. So I'm really happy with that little stack in there. It works very, very nice. Nice little sort of colored anodized stack as well. I do think it's got a bit of a color theme going on, which is pretty blinged out. Then we've got a pretty generic camera at the front. It's a 2.3mm lens, and it was quite fine flying around. You see that in the Part 2 as well. On the back, we've got a buzzer, some LEDs, and an XT60, which I actually think is a great thing when it comes to these sort of quads. So XT30 are okay, but I think XT60 is where it's at for that few extra grams. I think you're going to have a much better situation, especially when you've got those bigger batteries on here. And I do recommend about a 800 to 1000 milliamp hour battery. 800 is probably perfect, actually. Now, it's designed to take a 4S as well. I didn't get an antenna in mind, so I'm just going to be using one of these little dipoles, and you can see you've got your little pigtail that runs out here. I would recommend putting some more hot glue on here as well, because if that pops off, well, you might fry your VTX. Some extras, we've got a little battery pad in here to stop your battery flying around. And then I guess the final thing as well, it's a stretch deck, so it really is made for racing. This thing, I can't wait to see this up against some 5-inch races, actually. Now, in terms of the designer thing, nothing too new here. You know, 4 arms, 4 standoffs, just put together. Very, very simple design, but I think in this little 3-inch size, it's going to be great. It's going to hold up quite nicely. The carbon seems fine. The components they've put in here and a design sort of choice are great, and especially the motors. They've really designed everything to match the ESCs up to the motors to make an absolute little powerhouse. Now, when it comes to the quality of the thing, I'm going to give it like a 7 and 8 out of 10. It does have just some generic components in here. The soldering joints, they look fine, but the quality of the components, I can tell you after flying this thing around, that's sort of where I can back this thing up and say it performs very, very nicely. You know, the motors match with the ESCs with some better props on here, because I thought these props were pretty rubbish. Then you're just going to have an absolute little dream. Now, I guess the pros and the cons. Well, let's get the cons out of the way first. And this is a big one for me. The tune. The tune is a little bit off. It felt a little bit sloppy on the default, so you are going to need to change that. And normally I wouldn't do that. You know, I'd just be like, well, this is how it is out of the box. But you can see this thing has so much power that I knew it had potential. It was very, very easy to change, and after I did that, it flew very, very well. Now, another thing I didn't like, you didn't get an antenna, which kind of annoys me. I do wish they'd put a little, I guess, zip tie over this XT60 lead, but I say that all the time. The props were rubbish. I didn't like those, but the things I love the motors, I love the ESC, I love the frame design, I love the weight, and I love the performance. I can't wait to show you that Part 2, and I also love the price. I mean, for a value drone, about the 160, definitely check it out down below. Well, that's what it is at the time of reviewing this. 160 bucks for something that goes this well is amazing. But overall, I am very impressed, and I was a little bit skeptical of Helifar at first, and when I first reviewed this, and that's why it's back here, I guess, and I did that re-intro, because after flying this around, you can tell that this is something special, and I can't wait to show you that in the Part 2. And I think 3 inches, finally, I have something that has really taken over the XJB in terms of that budget 3-inch option. The XJB has performed for so well, for so long, and this one, once you do that tune, you guys are going to love it. Alrighty, so there it is. There's my Part 1 review. Now, Part 2 should be uploading. You can go watch a little card that should pop up here. It'll also be in the link down below, and trust me, when you see the speeds of this thing, your jaw is just going to drop, because I couldn't believe how fast it went, and yeah, I'm really excited for that Part 2, because it definitely does change a lot of people's minds about these Helifars. You know, some of them have been good, some have been bad. This one, even though it says Repo, it is definitely a pro racing drone. Now, I really like everything they've got in here. I like the motors, I like the components, the smart audio, the camera does work fine, and let me tell you, it flies pretty well out of the box as well. But in the Part 2, we're going to go through, and I'm going to show you some different PIDs you can put on it to take it just from a normal drone that's feeling a little bit sloppy on the sticks, but still with plenty of power, to an absolute race monster that is getting speeds you've never seen. So definitely stick around for that Part 2. Definitely subscribe for more FPV related content. I'm spinning everywhere, I'm so excited. Drop your comments down below. What do you think about the X140 Repo? And I'm going to see you in the Part 2, because that really is going to change some people's minds about how much power a little 3-inch has. Anyway, I'm rambling because I'm pretty excited, so happy flying. Alrighty, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. Definitely subscribe if you're new to the channel and check out these videos. And I'm also going to leave a little link here to my Patreon page, because I've got some fantastic Patreon supporters and I like to give back to them as well. So if you want to join the UAV Futures family, there's things like bonus Velcro straps, little bundles of FPV goodies and things like that that also get sent out. Anyway, happy flying.